Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all. Welcome to the U.S. Institute of Peace. My name is Nancy Lindborg. I'm the president of USIP. And for those of you who are new to USIP, we were founded just a little more than 30 years ago by Congress, dedicated to the proposition that peace is possible, peace is practical, and that it is essential for the United States and global security. And we pursue this mission of a world without violent conflict by working with partners around the world in conflict areas. And our Afghanistan program represents USIP's largest program. It's our largest in the world, and we work there with many wonderful civil society partners as well as closely with the government. So I'm delighted today to welcome Mrs. Rula Ghani. This is her first visit as First Lady of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the Institute. In fact, your first visit ever to USIP, so we're delighted to welcome you. And I'd like also to offer a special word of welcome and thanks to Ms. Lael Moeeb and to Ms. Ila Alam from the Afghan Embassy. We always appreciate the partnership, and thank you for your support in organizing today's event. And today's event comes at a very important time, a critical moment for Afghanistan, and at a time, unfortunately, when too many institutions are starting to draw down and reduce their engagement in Afghanistan. We remain committed to supporting government, civil society organizations, universities in dispute resolution, good governance, and addressing the root causes of extremism, of violent extremism. And our goal is, in fact, to increase our work in Afghanistan, as well as to help inform policymakers and practitioners here in the U.S. through events like this about key issues related to peace and conflict in Afghanistan, which is why we're here today, and which brings me to the privilege of introducing you to today's distinguished guests. Many of you have had a chance to meet or encounter or hear our guest today. First Lady Rula Ghani was born and raised in Lebanon. She holds degrees from l'Institut d'études politiques de Paris, the American University of Beirut, as well as Columbia University. She has long been an advocate for expanding the rights and opportunities for women in Afghanistan. When she returned to Afghanistan with her husband, now President Ghani, in 2002, she not only was one of the few spouses who was there, but she also quickly became a champion and a leader for supporting thousands of Afghanistan's poorest children through the Ashiana Foundation, which operates schools and social programs for orphans, street children, and young people from disadvantaged families. She's become a passionate advocate for rule of law and for advancing ways in which everybody in Afghanistan can be a participant in the country's future. In 2015, quite appropriately, Rula Ghani was named to the Time 100, which is a list of the world's most influential people. After her remarks, she will be joined on stage by Andrew Wilder, our Vice President of Asia, who is a long-time, very knowledgeable expert on Afghanistan and the region. And now, please join me in welcoming the First Lady of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, Mrs. Rula Ghani.
Thank you for this wonderful and thorough introduction. I've decided to call my talk today "From the Reign of Violence to the Rule of Law." And as I speak, you'll find out why I chose that title. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, distinguished members of the audience, I come to you in peace. Assalamu alaikum. It is befitting that I should be addressing the lingering effects of war at an institution that champions peace. At the end of a long life, which straddled 2 centuries, my mother used to reflect that war had always accompanied her. Born at the onset of the First World War, she married just before the Second World War, and lived through 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, short bursts of war in the Middle East that were followed in Lebanon by 17 years of civil war, from 1975 to 1992, punctuated by 2 invasions, one in 1982 and the more recent in 2006. My mother passed away in 2014 as the war was still raging in neighboring countries, threatening to spill over in Lebanon. Today, it seems that war is everywhere. It is not always conventional warfare or confrontation between states. It can also be an insurgency, guerrilla operations, increasingly terrorist attacks, or a mixture of all of the above. But in all cases, it definitely is increasingly powerful and destructive, and its effects on the civilian population are much more long-lasting. War and conflicts tear apart a society, breaking down its institutions, its traditions, its order. In time of war, anything goes. In its worst manifestation today, longtime friends become enemies, communities that coexisted peacefully for centuries suddenly are at each other's throats. Government, whether traditional or progressive, lose control locally and nationally, almost disappearing as warlords and charismatic outlaws emerge, bringing with them the reign of terror and violence. And indeed, as elsewhere, several decades of armed conflict in Afghanistan translated into a culture of violence and into what I like to call the survival mode. When you live on the edge of despair, when you are never certain what the next day will bring, when you have suffered unspeakable losses and have no idea how to control your destiny, when everything around you has fallen apart, you become focused on your own survival. You lose your sense of right and wrong. You are surrounded with unspeakable absurdity, where killing, maiming, and destroying is the norm. How can you hold on to your moral compass? Your survival is the only thing that matters, and you will use any means at your disposal to survive. Violence becomes the norm. Always rushed to be the first to break a story, journalists have had little time or inclination to delve into historical Afghanistan. In their accounts, this was a land still living in the Stone Ages, with competing warlords ready to slaughter each other at the slightest provocation. I have the privilege of having known pre-war Afghanistan as a young bride in the mid-1970s. We lived as a couple within the tightly knit embrace of the extended family. At the time, my husband was a budding anthropologist and a scholar of Afghan history. We used to go on week-long excursions to the remotest part of the country. Shirlan, Bakhtia, Nuristan, Bamiyan, Kunduz, Mazar-e-Sharif, Tashkorgan, Faizabad, Pul-e-Khumri, Ghazni, Andarao, Barikot. Wherever we went, the same rules of hospitality, the same social conventions applied. People were secure in their traditions, in their religion, and regardless of the various ethnicities, they adhered to the same code of behavior. People treated each other with respect and dignity. I keep such fond memories of that Afghanistan. To bring it back, we need to reestablish social order. Violence as a preferred means of social interaction needs to be replaced with a fundamental respect for human dignity, a human dignity that is secured by the rule of law. In 2004, a constitutional loijerga being a traditional assembly of elders, which most of you know, that loijerga produced a Qanun Asasi, literally fundamental law or constitution. In it, respect for the independence of the judiciary is enshrined, and the structure, role, responsibilities, and qualification requirements of those appointed to the Supreme Court and other judiciary organs are clarified. Previous administration did not pay much attention to the judicial system and allowed it to become riddled with graft and corruption. One of the priority commitments of the Afghan Unity Government, as stated at the December 2014 London conference, has been to establish the rule of law. This is how it reads. The judiciary must become the means to internalize and interpret the rule of law so that trust in rules gets established. The executive branch then has to become the embodiment of rule-based behavior. Our legislative branch needs to pass legislation about rules that can be implemented and internalized, not abstractly driven agendas that breed cynicism rather than meet needs. Representation and voice must be channeled fairly and transparently through the political system rather than outside of it, and citizens' aspiration turned into programs that invest in people's welfare. In that spirit, recommendation for the reform of the justice system included, and I paraphrase, 1, restoring the confidence of the people in justice institutions. 2, reviewing the qualifications of all legal professionals, improving the transparency of case management systems, providing legal aid, and better coordination between justice institutions. Immediately reviewing the cases of all detainees illegally held in pre-trial detention. You know the difference between detention and imprisonment. Detention is when somebody is arrested, but you're not sure that this person has a case against them or not. Prison is once it has been decided that you have been tried and found guilty. But in detention, we have had in Afghanistan, unfortunately, detentions that went for much too long. People would be put in detention centers and forgotten there. And actually, the law says that they shouldn't be in detention more than 72 hours if you cannot bring a case against them. So this is why immediately reviewing the case of all detainees illegally held in pretrial detention. Strengthening measures for protecting women against violence and implementing the EVA law, the Elimination of Violence Against Women law. Reforming police training and oversight, reforming the prison system and the processing of prisoners. 18 months later, quite a few recommendations have already been achieved. One of the first steps has been to bring reform to the Supreme Court. A new Chief Justice was appointed, Syed Yusuf Halim. 402 judicial officials were transferred, fired, or replaced. Among them, 135 new judges were appointed in Kabul and the provinces, of which 16 are women. Within a couple of days of his taking charge, the Chief Justice abrogated 2 rules that were the source of great corruption, and you'll see why. The first rule used to allow the Chief Justice to overrule any judgment reached by the Supreme Court effectively undermining the whole justice system. The second used to allow the Chief Justice to overturn any court ruling that specified a financial sanction of or punishment. No wonder money used to change hands so much. One of the first steps that has been, the administrative structure of the Supreme Court was also overhauled with a redistribution of the various diwan, which is approximately a department, and the creation of a special diwan for women headed by one of the Supreme Court justices. This particular diwan is expected to help expedite the rulings on cases involving women, as they used to notoriously take several years to be tried, sometimes 8 to 9 years. Establishment of special courts in the Attorney General Office also underwent changes. A new Attorney General, Farid Hamid, was recently appointed. Some of you might know that for many years he had served as a Human Rights Commissioner at the Independent Human Rights Commission and is a well-known human rights activist. A reform of the whole Directorate of the Attorney General is also underway. In the previous administration, there used to be offices of the Attorney General only in 8 provinces. Today, they exist in all 34 provinces. And women are heading those offices in 7 provinces: Herat, Takhar, Jawzjan, Mazar-e-Sharif, Badakhshan, Paktika, and Bamyan. In his first 100-day speech, President Ghani noted that according to the observation of judges, and here I quote, over 600 prosecutors have only a high school education and cannot do elementary submission of cases. End of quote. To the point that 60 to 90% of submissions by prosecutors didn't meet the requirement of the law. The new Attorney General has been asked and tasked with bringing changes to the situation. Within the Attorney General Office, a special directorate for the implementation of the EVA law, EVA being again the elimination of violence against women, is led by a female prosecutor who has a team of 23 prosecutors and 9 administrative staff, of which 13 are women. This special directorate has registered to date 9,752 cases in the capital and the provinces, and was able to pass judgment on 5,603 cases. As for the reform of prisons and detention centers, the overall priority of the new administration has been to emphasize the rehabilitation process. An extensive assessment of the detention centers was conducted by the unity government, as well as by civil society organizations, who previously had been prevented to undertake this kind of research. Based on those combined efforts, the government has made several interventions. And here you'll have to excuse me, but I'm more familiar with the changes that were brought to women prisoners, so I shall concentrate on those. Those interventions include approval by the Cabinet of a draft policy submitted by the Ministry of Women's Affairs and addressing issues of female inmates and their children before and after imprisonment. Establishment of a special committee of legal experts to review women cases in detention centers in all provinces, which I had mentioned earlier. Establishment of special courts in 34 provinces to expedite women cases in detention centers. Thorough review of all staff at detention centers and replacement of those not fulfilling their duties according to the rule of law. And finally, sexual harassment cases involving staff are directly scrutinized by the special investigators of the President's office. because unfortunately the situation in women's prison was such a mess, I would say, that a lot of illicit behavior was ongoing and a lot of abuse. As for women detained in prisons, a special commission headed by Justice Anissa Rassouli, the woman judge who almost made it to the Supreme Court, but missed ratification from the Parliament by only 6 votes. That special commission is revising the files of every woman prisoner. By the time I had left Kabul 3 days ago, their efforts, by the time I had left Kabul 3 days, they had completed the review of all female prisoners in Kabul. And their efforts had, as a result, over 100 women be released and an equal number see their sentences reduced. Hopefully, gone are the days when women languished in prison, helpless and hopeless. It is to be noted that women are increasingly taking part in the reform of the justice system. Recently, at the 3rd anniversary of the Association of Women Judges, I found out that Afghanistan boasts now 282 judges that are women and 484 women that are defense lawyers. In conclusion, I would like to state that this is only a snapshot of the ongoing reform of the justice system in Afghanistan. There probably are other important changes underway, but if I was able to gather in a few days that much information, I don't see why journalists and analysts that pose as specialists of Afghan affairs cannot do the same. The present unity government and the people of Afghanistan are hard at work establishing strong foundations on which to rebuild their country. And I'm very hopeful of their success, notwithstanding the repeated pronouncement of the prophets of gloom and doom. Thank you very much. Shall we?
You sit here. Let me add my welcome to Nancy. It's great to have you here. We enjoyed the opportunity to host your husband, President Ghani, just over a year ago here at USIP, and thrilled to welcome you here as well. I'd like to also welcome all of you in the audience for taking time to join us today, as well as those who have joined us virtually as this event is being webcast. And just to emphasize, this is on the record and being webcast. We also would welcome, if anyone wants to submit questions via Twitter, to send it to the hashtag Ghani USIP. So that's hashtag Ghani USIP if you want to submit any questions via Twitter. I was struck at a recent event where you also spoke in Washington. A young man in the audience stood up and he said, he was very honored to be there, to hear you speak. He said, you are the first Afghan First Lady he's seen, let alone heard from. And I think that's probably true of just about all Afghans. I think you could argue you're probably the most visible First Lady since Queen Soraya in the 1920s. And I guess with that background, as you took on this role, which is new to you, but also to most Afghans, I was wondering if you could say a little bit about how you thought through what you saw as your role, what your key objectives would be in that role, and how you'd sort of go about achieving those objectives.
Okay. I never expected to be a First Lady. Let's start with that. So when my husband was elected, I had no agenda. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I decided to take it slowly and to try and see what would be developing around me. After 2 weeks of staying at home, I decided I needed to do something else than watching TV and reading books. And with the encouragement of my husband, I opened a small office with just one secretary, who used to be the secretary of Mrs. Karzai, the former First Lady. And decided to, you know, open my doors and welcome whoever would want to come. And I thought I'd have maybe a couple of people coming and drinking tea with me, or, you know, a very easy situation. Maybe it was the novelty of somebody who was opening her doors, in my case, opening her doors within the palace, because people were not allowed in the palace before. Maybe it was the novelty of having a person that did not grow up in Afghanistan, but married an Afghan and decided to work for the country. I don't know, they came. And they came, delegation after delegation. They came from all over the country. They came from very distant provinces, from very close ones, from Kabul. And at first, you know, it might have been curiosity, but I enjoy being with people. I enjoy talking. This is why I do so many talks. But they felt comfortable with me. And we started exchanging ideas, exchanging comments, concerns, complaints. Sometimes I scold them if ever they ask for something, and I think, you know, come on, why are you asking for this? But it is a very relaxed atmosphere, and I think people maybe needed to have somebody who was somewhat their elder and somewhat has the time to sit with them and to listen to them and to take down notes and to kind of help them figure out what the solutions are. So my role grew somewhat organically. I did not decide that this is what I'm going to do. I never thought I would be sought by so many people. And basically it carries on to be like that. The flow of people continues. It's not as rushed as in the early days, but I still get people who want to come and tell me about what they're doing. Sometimes they need help. They are stuck in some governmental procedure, and I can make a phone call. But I'm very clear. I don't have a budget, an operational budget. I cannot give money. My post is not an official one. I'm neither elected nor selected. I just happen to be the wife of the president. So I don't think I have that much power, but I can always pick up the phone or have one of my advisors pick up the phone and call somebody, for example, at Arazi, the Department of Land. And when I had some women who had come from Herat and wanted to rent some land to be able to cultivate saffron on it. And they were not getting any kind of answer. Unfortunately, it's often the case for Afghan women. When they deal with official institutions, they're often not really maltreated, but they're often ignored. They can sit in the waiting room for 3-4 hours and nobody will come and talk to them. So it's really not difficult for me to ask one of my advisors to call, and which he did in that case. And the guy said, oh yeah, we do have a group of women here. Duh. Anyway, so, and I'll get back to you. And 20 minutes later he called and said, well, we processed their demands. It's okay, it's done. That's wonderful. This is one of the very easy, very rewarding cases that this happened like that. Other cases I can't help. I really don't know what to do, and, but I give encouragement. I suggest other people they can go and see. And this is really one big part of my work. Yes.
Okay, no, thank you very much. You touched on a little bit in your closing remarks. I mean, clearly one aspect of your job is also to come to places like USIP in Washington, and I know you were in New York yesterday, and raising awareness about the situation in Afghanistan, and also that it's not all doom and gloom. You know, I first worked in the sort of 80s and 90s in Afghanistan, so it's possible to see the tremendous gains, and it's important to remind American audiences about those. However, the situation does seem, you know, to be difficult, extremely difficult, and in some ways getting worse due to their economic situation, security situation. Last night, just as an interesting experiment, I went on to the New York Times website, which I'm sure is your favorite newspaper, and I did a search for Afghanistan, and just for the last 7 days, and there's about 96 entries. And I did not go through all of them. I went through about the first 20 or 30. And here are the headlines. So May 7th, Taliban publicly execute 2 women in northern Afghanistan. May 8th, U.S. role in Afghanistan turns to combat again with a tragic error, talking about the Kunduz situation. May 9th, U.S. warns of kidnapping threat in Afghanistan. May 10th, UK's Cameron caught calling Nigeria, Afghanistan fantastically corrupt. May 11th, Afghanistan faces tough battle as Haqqani unify the Taliban. May 12th, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, exiled Afghan insurgent, nears a comeback. But finally on May 12th, I saw a positive one, which was Tajikistan starts building power link to Afghanistan and Pakistan. And then, you know, I didn't go much further, but just to give a sense that that's the coverage and that's the attitude about the situation. But I don't think it's just the New York Times. I mean, even when I go to Kabul regularly, and talking to people there, and unfortunately I don't get out of Kabul much anymore, there is this perception of it's a very difficult situation, and some Afghans voting with their feet to leave. And so I guess I'm wondering, in that difficult context, what sort of gives you, what are your sort of hopes, but also fears for the future of Afghanistan? So what gives you hope to get?
I think you've made my case by listing all these titles of articles, and I don't think I'm really very off the mark when I call most journalists prophets of doom and gloom. It's partly because they are after sensational news will sell newspapers. Partly because they don't really have as much freedom of movement as they used to have, and you mentioned that yourself. And then they rely on some fixers, and I'd like to know who those fixers are, because then they really need to be talked to. The situation in Kabul is not that extremely bad. I remember once opening the TV, and there was Nick Patton-Walsh of CNN, and he was saying Kandahar is about to fall. Well, that was like 2 months ago. Kandahar is still there, and the Taliban are still in their hills, not able to gain much ground. There is much that's done about gaining 600 meters one side and losing 600 meters on the other side. This is not really battles that really count. Yes, it is a difficult situation. Yes, we have difficulties with our economy. Yes, we have a difficulty with our security. But it was to be predicted. I mean, NATO just withdrew. I don't know how many troops, 1,000 troops. So all that economy that was supporting the NATO troops, all these people are now without a job. So yes, the economy is not as good as before. And yes, security is not as good as before because there are less troops on the ground. But look at the results of the army, the Afghan army. NATO generals will tell you that the Afghan army is performing very well within the limits of their training and within the limits of their equipment. The Taliban tried again to take back Kunduz. They were flatly defeated, and they lost quite a few of their members. There was recently another battle in Kunar, around Ghaziabad. I don't know exactly the details, but I know my husband told me, well, the victory of Ghaziabad will go down in history. And I think there too, there were maybe 100 Taliban that were killed, Taliban or Daesh or whatever they are. Because unfortunately now, the Taliban are not just Afghan Taliban. We seem to have people from all corners of the world. We have Chechens, we have Uzbeks, we have people from other countries. And so it's becoming, at first you could say that, well, the Taliban, they are our brothers, they are our cousins. We should just kind of sit down and talk and discuss with them peace. But right now, these are mercenaries. These are people that are fighting not because they're fighting for a cause. They're fighting because they get a salary of $400 or $500 a month. So there are things that are changing. So basically, what I tried to do today by addressing the justice sector, I took one sector that I knew enough because of the work that has been undertaken for women in prisons. And I realized what kind of reforms were being undertaken. The unity government is busy trying to set up the foundation for a solid state. And it is making a lot of progress. There are a lot of people that are not happy not to be in government. There are a lot of people who would like to go back to the days where they could fill up their pockets very easily because a lot of international aid money would come and they had ways of diverting the funds to their own accounts. But yeah, well, if they are not happy, I'm sorry. Actually, I think it is progress that they're not happy.
If I could just pick up on that, the rule of law issue. Obviously central, USIP has focused on that as one of our main pillars since 2002, very much under the belief that you really can't have peace if you don't have some semblance of rule of law. So a real priority to rebuild that. And you touched on that very eloquently in your remarks about a lot of the measures that have been taken. I was wondering if you could maybe even just summarize a little bit more what you think might be the most effective way to address promote the rule of law in terms of reforms, and maybe in particular on the issue of corruption, because that's what we do hear a lot about. It does have, for many, many years in Afghanistan, has been, I think, played a role generating disaffection with the government, perhaps creating some encouragement to those, trying to delegitimize the government. And so what you think could be done, in particular from a rule of law angle, and you touched on some of them today, but what would you highlight as some of the most important in this regard?
I think the unity government really started with a bang when they reopened the Kabul bank case and put some of the perpetrators in prison and are asking for the money to be paid back, because this was money that, basically it was a case where some important people were able to get these humongous loans, which actually came from the deposits of small, regular people, their savings. So restitution of the funds is one of the things. But I think what I pointed out about the two measures that the Chief Justice took as soon as he got in position, the fact that we used to have a justice system, but it was a joke, because you could follow a case for several years through the first court, through the appellate court, and then through the Supreme Court, and get, at all three levels, get a decision in your favor. And then, by just a signature, the Chief Justice could revoke everything. So, that is exactly a systemic door to corruption. The other one was that if ever you had a case in the courts and you were fined a certain amount, again, the Chief Justice could, by a stroke of the pen, say, it's okay, you don't need to pay anything. Probably the money went into his pocket. So these two measures already have reduced a lot the possibility of corruption. The Attorney General, I understand that, I'm not really quite sure whether it has been done or not, but it's being considered. The Attorney General is not supposed, prosecutors are not supposed to get into a private dispute with two private parties. They are supposed to be in disputes that involve the government. But they used to get involved and get paid by both sides and side with the side that gives them most money or whatever. So this is also being removed. I'm not sure whether it's happened or not, but so these are kind of measures. I am not really a specialist of law. I'm not a jurist. I'm not a lawyer. But for me, it's just common sense. You put laws that are applicable to everyone very fairly, you really diminish the need for corruption. If it's fair and square, if you win your case because you are on the side of the law, then nobody's going to have to bribe their way. I hope that it's going to carry on like this, and I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that you have to change the mentality of people at the same time, but when they find out that they cannot do certain things anymore, maybe they'll decide that they need to follow the law.
Okay. I have many more questions I want to ask, but I shouldn't be selfish. I want to open it up, but maybe before, I'll ask we got one question by Twitter just before we began, and I'll ask that question to you, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. Heather McLeod of NAFSA asks, how do you empower those with no voice to make their voices heard?
Everybody has a voice. They just don't know it. You just have to encourage them. I don't know. I mean, that's what I do day in, day out. They're citizens of the country. They have the right to speak, and they should.
Okay, questions from the audience, right here. If you could please introduce yourself, but also try to keep your questions or comments very short, so we have time for everyone.
I'm Seema, and I have a comment. Everybody wants to know about Mrs. Ghani today in the paper. When I went back to Afghanistan when she was the wife of the finance minister, there was other ministers that they had 14, 15 cars with a guard at their front door. Mrs. Ghani got an old used Toyota Corolla, painted it gray, had a driver, and she had to teach him from the back seat how to drive a stick shift. She had a black scarf.
That's nerve-wracking in Kabul traffic, I imagine.
Yes. She helped Ashiana. She helped there was a lot of orphanage. And she went street to street, door to door to help those children. And today we are talking about all the bad news in Afghanistan. We hear about it. Turn on the 4 o'clock news here in Washington. What do you hear? Shooting, killing, all of the bad news. And hopefully all the journalists will see the good. And we are hoping that there should be something from the embassy or some journalist will go to Afghanistan and give us the report of all the good things. And good luck.
Thank you, Seema.
Well, Afghanistan is certainly not the only country where good news is no news. So, but, another question, gentleman in the back.
Hello, my name is Sam Farzane, and my question is about the situation. I have 2 questions. One of them is about the situation for women. You talk about the changes in judiciary system, but there are other things that is not related to judiciary system, like people who choose to suicide, kill themselves by burning in Herat especially. What do you do for them?
I think this is a common mistake to expect that I should do something. I'm just one person, and I have 4 advisors. We're just 5 women trying to help people. I hope that the atmosphere that I'm trying to create becomes a positive atmosphere that makes that people do not feel anymore that they are in desperate situation, and that they have places where they can go and ask for help or ask for a change of their situation. That's what I'm trying to do. I cannot help case by case.
I'm going to take another Twitter question. Megan Stone, the president of the Malala Fund, asks, what about your time as a young student and activist? Does that sort of inform your work today for the rights of girls and women as a First Lady?
This thing of women's rights, I am all for women's rights, but I never talk about women's rights because women are part of society. Look at you. There are women, there are men. You know, this is what society is. We are all living together, and families cannot happen unless there is a woman and a man together. So I like to think that what you need to push for is respect. Respect, mutual respect of each other, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're a child, whether you're an old person. I think respecting the human dignity of every human being is extremely important. And that's usually how I couch my, my activities. I never was a political activist. I just always had very strong feelings and always worked according to my feelings and according to my convictions. I hope it answers the question.
We had another hand in the back. The woman, yes.
Marzia Faraz, National Democratic Institute. My question is on informal rule of law and dispute resolution. In Afghanistan, it's very common to resolve disputes through the traditional dispute resolution mechanisms and means, such as shuras, jirgas. Women are not present at these shuras and jirgas, even if they are a party to a dispute. Decisions made through these means and mechanisms are discriminatory and biased against women. The executions that Mr. Wilder mentioned, they have been said that these are carried out by Taliban, but they could easily be carried out by community leaders, tribal elders, based on the decisions made at the shuras or jirgas. So what's your take on this? Has there been any collaborations at the government level between the Ministry of Women Affairs and Ministry of Justice to address this issue? Thank you.
You assert your information with a lot of firmness. It shows your age. I came to Afghanistan 40 years ago, 41 years ago. And yes, there were traditions. Yes, there were shuras. Yes, there were decisions that were made, but women did have a way of being part of the decisions. And the climate of violence and of outright disrespect to women was not there. And this is why, because I've seen that, this is why I feel comfortable in saying we can reestablish an atmosphere, a mentality of humanity in Afghanistan, because it is part of Afghan culture. What we're seeing, what you have described now, is the culture of war. This is the violence I was talking about. When you are pushed so far that you can only deal with situation by being violent. And you get violent against those who are the weakest. And women, unfortunately, are usually in weaker positions. I'm really hopeful that we will be able to revive true Afghan Ananat. And I hope that we'll be able to change the mentality of people. People don't like violence. People were horrified when Farkhunda was lynched. People were really very upset. And when I say people, I mean women and men. People woke up and said, how can we accept to have so much violence? How can we accept this violence in our street? But it takes time to change mentalities. It doesn't happen very quickly. You have to talk a lot. You have to create situations to explain to people. You have to have public announcements. You have to have dramas, culture, art. I mean, there are so many ways of trying to change mentalities. And I hope, and it's not the work of one person, I hope all the Afghans will join to change the mentality.
Thank you. The gentleman on the row here.
I am Rana Sham Rabbani from Pakistan. You admitted that you are not selected or elected and you have no power. But one big power you have, being a good wife, you can influence your husband. So I will suggest you to give more stress and attention towards education of women, especially the girls. So maybe some Sakina and other women sitting here, they are produced and they play their roles for changing the minds of their men. Thank you.
There's a comment. We'll go one row in front.
You don't want me to answer?
Sorry. So I thought I would. You're very welcome to answer. I saw it more as a comment, but over to you.
No, I wanted to thank him for his comment, and I'm sure we're working in that direction.
Yes.
To what extent is there an effort? Oh, I'm Meryl Steiner. I'm nobody.
Nobody is a nobody.
To what extent is there an effort to bring this concept of rule of law into the schools to teach young people the concept, as well as what can be done and what's being done to help them feel more secure and bring it home to the dinner table?
You're absolutely right. And I've discovered that the curriculum used to have, when my husband used to be in school, a subject that was called Hubb al-Watan, which is love of country, which is civic studies. Unfortunately, it's not being taught anymore, and I'm trying to have it reinstated. I think it's really very important. My office organized a program last year with 12 schools in Kabul, grade 9 to 12. We called it the week of Afghanistan, Hafte Afghanistan. And during that week, we just got all the directors, the headmistresses and headmaster. It was 6 schools for girls and 6 schools for boys. And we helped them set up a program for 6 days. Each day was a different activity. Some was, the folklore, some was the culture, some was more the environment, some was the history. So, I mean, they really loved it. The children loved it. They were so happy to do something, and we produced a 35-minute movie on the activities. I think the children are thirsty for something like that.
You have the gentleman back there with his, yes.
Thank you. Very welcome to the United States, to your third country actually, and nobody better than you in this room understand what means the war and peace, because Lebanon and Kabul, both your homes, is in war. Arash Shekin, I'm former Afghanistan Fulbright Manager working for State Department. We just left a couple of weeks ago with my wife. My question goes to that article of New York Times of May 12, actually, about the Gulbat in Hikmatyar. And the reason I make a very difficult question for you, not expecting.
Please keep it short.
Yeah, not expecting 100% answer, but I hope that you can think, we can all of us think. 10 years ago, we started the conciliation process with the Taliban. Today, every of us is accepting that the Taliban have to come and the government into the society and return back to home. But there's also a few people like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. There's a red line for generation of mine, for generation of all of Afghans here are sitting. It's just like you go to the New York City and ask them, people, do you want that Mr. Bin Laden come back and join us? This is how it works for Afghanistan and for the most Afghans. I know, we hope that we actually always, I'm thinking, we was supposed to have you and Mr. Ghani 13 years, 15 years ago in Afghanistan, and not in Karzai, and not in, let's say, okay. But
okay,
I hope that we think about that.
Let me answer you. I understand what you're saying. And in war, you really develop very strong feelings of hate towards other people. But making peace, you don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies. Unfortunately, it's hard, it's not easy. And you can be sure that my husband is not giving away any kind of privilege or concession on people's rights. But this person is also an Afghan. And he has a right to be in his country under certain conditions, under his respect for the Constitution and his respect for the rules of the country. So it's a hard one to swallow, I agree. I've had this same kind of reaction towards people in Lebanon. We need to move on. And this is why I have a lot of hope in the generation that is 25 to 30, because they come without that baggage. They don't have to deal with that. They don't know who Gulbuddin Hekmatyar is, and they don't care even who he is. So if ever he comes and he goes and finds a house somewhere and lives peacefully, that's fine. It's not a problem. I hope you'll be able to find that peace in you.
Sticking to the theme of conflict resolution, we have a Twitter question from Doug Brooks, the board member of the Afghan American Chamber of Commerce, who asks, could informal interactions among first spouses in the region be a method to reduce political tensions? Now, we've worked on peace for many years in Afghanistan, and I have to say this is an innovative idea I haven't heard before, so over to you.
Well, it's a good suggestion. I'm ready to explore it, but it has not happened yet.
Okay. I could go to the very back, the woman, give a chance to a journalist.
Thank you so much. My name is Nazira Azim Karimi. I'm correspondent for Ariana Television Network from Afghanistan. First of all, I gathered information that you received an award the day before yesterday. Could you please tell us something about that one? The second question, do you have any comment about yesterday's incident in London? Somebody interrupted President Ghani's meeting, and also as a wife, you are not worried about President Ghani's safety and security?
Lots of questions.
London's dangerous.
Yeah, everywhere in the world is becoming dangerous. Yesterday, the Lotus Circle of the Asia Foundation honored me with an award for the work I'm doing in Afghanistan. It was very kind of them to recognize my work. I think I started my speech by telling them that I was accepting the award not for me, but in the name of all Afghan women who are working very hard day in, day out to make a good life for themselves and their families. Regarding the incident in London, I only heard it very briefly. I've spoken to my husband this morning. He didn't seem to be at all affected. So, you know, a heckler is a heckler. You just take it.
On the right? Yeah, this way.
My second question is about the younger generation, that you and President Ghani encouraging them to stay in the country, and you just told us about it, to build the country. And some people criticize you in saying that your own children are living abroad. What do you say about that?
Criticism is always very easy. First of all, we need to set the record straight. According to the media, it's like millions of Afghans have left Afghanistan. As far as I understand, I've seen two figures. One is 140,000, the other one is 180,000. For a country of 32 million people, it doesn't seem like everybody is packing and leaving. Okay, I mean, this is just common sense. If you find other figures, please let me know. The criticism about our children. Our children were born here. They went to school here. They worked here. They live here. They are in their 30s. We never thought we were going back to Afghanistan. So why should they uproot themselves and go back there? They do come often. They really, they are both in two very different fields. And in their own fields, they have given quite a few workshops to help the young people in those fields. I think they're doing their bit, but I don't see why they should go back. Their life is here. It so happens. It's destiny. You know? So, and we left Afghanistan and we were ready to go back. This person who's sitting here knows it better than anyone else. We were ready to go back. All the family members of my family were put in prison. Did you want him to go back? Would you go back to Iran if your family were in prison? So, you know.
Right here.
My name is Samia Aldaf. I'm an international development specialist. Those of us who've been working in this area know how difficult it is to bring about institutional change in developing countries. So our hopes and prayers go with the unity government and the long-suffering people of Afghanistan. My specific question to Mrs. Ghani is that, you know, you have a very critical platform, and, you know, in your own gentle way, you use it very well. I bring to you an appeal from all the international public health specialists to please put your two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, because as you well know, you know, there is ample research that says that unless, you know, this is handled collaboratively, it will not happen. So thank you very much for your time.
I agree totally with you. It's something that needs to be done regionally. Yes.
The woman back here in the black. Yes.
Salam alaikum. My name is Marjan. You probably don't remember, but I was one of those few people who came to the palace and met with you those early days.
Ask her then.
And the reforms that you mentioned look forward to the cases that already exist or will come. And that's very exciting. Every little step counts. I'm just wondering about major cases that happened in the past, particularly you mentioned Farkhunda, and at least here in the West, I had already left Afghanistan. Do you have any hope that major cases like that may be reviewed again under the new regulations and reforms that you mentioned? Thank you.
Indeed, the Farkhunda case is under, because it was obvious that the kind of judgment that was reached was not correct. So many accounts of this incident through so many different phones that we know exactly who are the perpetrators. But again, it takes time to change mentalities, and some of them have very powerful protectors.
Blue in the very back row.
Hi, Mrs. Ghani. My name is Arzo Wardak with the Alliance in Support of the Afghan People. I just want to start off by saying I have a great deal of respect for you and the work that you've done. And many members of our community, including myself, traveled to Greece a couple months ago. I spent nearly a month working in a refugee camp. And on our first day, we came across 7,000 refugees, violence on their bodies. And the numbers essentially helping these women readjust back to Afghanistan so that they're not coming back to nothing or far more worse than they left off. Thank you.
It cannot be found because it's under office of the First Lady of the Islamic Republic. Still remember your Pashto or your Dari. You can follow, celebrated your work there in Greece.